Welcome Strategy Battle Gamers to our GBHL YouTube video. You're here with your host GBHL Damian, and I am here with a slightly odd and slightly different video for you. By way of explanation, I am currently on my way home from the Crisis in Longbottom tournament at Mansfield at Slayer Gaming. And as you will find out throughout the course of this video, I went to this tournament on my own. So I'm currently driving home. It's Sunday night. It is just gone 9:10, and I am on a long drive home. I've done the kind of interesting bit from Mansfield, which is kind of getting to the motorway, and I now have 108 miles to go on the M1, which is a long, straight, boring road. So that's probably going to take me somewhere in the region of at least an hour and a half before I get to the M25. And so I decided, to entertain myself, I would do a tournament review. Now, I don't know how this will sound. Hopefully it will come through alright, and there'll just be a kind of background buzz. Obviously I'm in the car, so if there is an annoying noise on this, sorry. But hopefully it will still sound relatively alright. And basically, as much as it's here to give you a tournament review, it's also here to keep me sane. So I'm doing this one as much for me as for you guys. So I've got something to do, something to entertain me on the trip. So yeah, I hope you enjoy that. I hope that's all right. And the other kind of rationale behind it is Tom didn't come to this tournament and James didn't come to this tournament. It was just me and Jamie from the channel, and both of us dislike doing solo videos. I'm not a big fan of them at all. I know Jamie isn't, and so because we wouldn't be together, the odds of us we live miles apart, so we're not going to get a chance to sit down together and talk about the tournament. So I'm not sure if Jamie's planning on doing a tournament review, but I would be unlikely to be able to find the time to kind of sit down for an hour or whatever this will be and chat to you, whereas I am on my own for an hour, or at least an hour now, and I thought it might be a good chance. So yeah, that's the rationale behind this. And also I brought my camera all the way to Mansfield and we didn't film anything, so I'm doing a video so that we get some use out of the camera. So there you go. I hope that sounds right. So yes, I'm going to do a review of the Crisis in Longbottom tournament. So to give you some idea about this, this one was an escalation tournament, so it was 400 points on day one and 600 points on day two, and that suited me better than the original idea actually. The original plan was it was going to be a 500 point tournament, which is a points level that I don't like for my ferals and Urukai and Isengard and all that sort of stuff. So when they changed it to 400 and 600, it still wasn't great, but it was definitely better. So you had to pick a 400 point army for day one, and then you had to add to it for day two. So you couldn't change anything. You had to take everything exactly the same as it was in day one. Couldn't give anyone extra war gear or anything like that, but just add 200 points to the army. And in addition, your leader on day one had to be your leader on day two. So that was an important factor. So I started thinking about my army. I'm in a reasonably good position in the league. I think I'm currently 4th, so there is still a chance that if the results go my way I could win, so I decided to come and compete at this tournament. So my 400 point army was actually kind of relatively simple and quite solid. I chose Vrasku and a Uruk captain with heavy armor and shield to make him defense 7. He was going to be my leader, and he led, I think it was, the captain had 6 berserkers and 6 ferals, and Vrasku had 8 crossbows and 2 berserkers. So I had a total of, is that 24 models I think I had? 24 models, 22 warriors and 8 shots, 8 crossbow shots plus Vrasku, which is pretty good. And the warbands were nearly full, so good use of the points. So I was quite happy with that as an army. I went for the defense 7 captain because I knew at some point over the weekend, the contest of champions scenarios, I think it's called, that I believe James wrote, where your leaders fight each other, that was going to come up. So I needed a leader who was a bit survivable and could contend with leaders of potentially 600 point armies. So I decided to go for a defense 7 captain, who's not someone I normally take in my army. And it also meant that I had to leave my shaman for day 2. So I felt a bit exposed at day 1 without having a shaman, without having fury. But I thought the 10 shots, including Vrasku, kind of 14 to attack models, plus my heroes and 5 might should kind of get the job done. So I was pretty happy with that as an army. And for the extra day, for my extra 600 points, I added in an armoured shaman to get my fury going, 3 more crossbows, and I think it was 5 more berserkers and 3 more ferals. So it's basically an armoured shaman and 11 more guys essentially, which took me up to 36 models I believe, something, yeah, 36 models, 6 might because I had the shaman, and 11 shots plus Frasco, which is also pretty good. But I was worried about day 2. I thought 600 points, the army's all right, but traditionally, as I said, I've suffered around the 500, 600 point mark, and I wasn't convinced it would do well against some of the armies with the bigger toys. I was also very, very aware that I didn't have Saruman, because the points weren't quite big enough in my opinion. So I didn't have that control model, I didn't have anything to immobilise. Like, I had Fury up my sleeve, but I had no kind of monster control or hero control, which I was a bit worried about. But so yeah, my thinking was, if I wanted to do well, I would have to win all 3 games on the first day, because I probably wouldn't win all 3 games on day 2. That was my thinking. So yeah. Slightly strange thing about this tournament for me was that no one else came from down south. I was the only southerner who went up. It's kind of a good thing and a bad thing, of course, but we've got a really great independent scene now with loads and loads of tournaments, and what that means is not everyone can make every tournament, and just the way this one fell, a lot of the people from down south didn't attend it. I think there might have been a feeling that because Slayer Gaming are running the league finale in December, which is, where are we now? 2 months? October now? About 2 months away. I think a lot of people are planning on going to that, so decided they wouldn't come to this one, which is fair enough. But I'm a big fan of Slayer Gaming, I'm a big fan of the Mansfield events. I love the 281 where we always stay, always really nice sociable events, so I wanted to make the effort, so I signed up. And yeah, I had to travel on my own, which I don't think I've ever done before. I've never driven to a tournament like up north on my own. But I managed to get out of I managed to leave like home at about what time? 3:45 in the end. So I'd hoped to get away a bit earlier than that, but still I managed to get away before rush hour. And the journey from Twickenham to Mansfield is 2.5 hours. And I was thinking, okay, that'll be alright. And I made plans to meet up with Ed and Jamie and the Scottish guys for dinner, and we had a table booked for 7:30. And I got onto the M25 and it was horrendously slow all the way around. It was just horrible. So the first 36 minutes of my journey, meant to be 36, took me 1 hour and 20 minutes. Then I got onto the M1 and there was a huge delay on that, almost at every junction. And I was just crawling along and having the worst. It was just horrendous, just very, very, very slow for Friday evening traffic. And then just as I was making some progress, you see the screens on the motorway that came up saying that the junction 23 to 24 had a half-hour delay. So I was like, well, I can't do this. This is when I was an hour away, so it's still going to be 1.5 hours. I was like, no. So I came off the motorway and went cross-country, avoided the road on my sat-nav and went through loads of A roads. That at one point then took me into a complex that was obviously new, and my sat-nav hadn't got it, so it got utterly confused and got me turned around, and I ended up heading completely the wrong direction. And so yes, this all meant that I had the absolute journey from hell, and bless the guys, bless like Ed and Jamie and all the Scottish guys for waiting for me, but the table was planned for 7:30, it got pushed back to 8 and eventually pushed back to 8:30, and they were all so nice to wait for me, so cheers for that guys, I really, really appreciate it. And I eventually got to the 281 and it had taken me 4.5 hours, and I'm sure the guys who were there will agree with this, but I was a wreck. It's really hard to explain, but 4.5 hours with no one to talk to. That's why I'm doing this video, to hopefully alleviate some of it on the way home. But with no one to talk to is horrendous. It's not. It was just awful, and I hadn't eaten anything or drunk anything in like 5 hours. I was hungry, I was miserable, and my back was cramping. It was just horrible. But I got there and the guys came out, so there was Alan Liddell and David Reed from Scotland were there, Jamie Giblin, Ed Ball and Damian. Was a very nice group. Charles was there as well. We decided to stay at the 281 and watch the rugby, which was fair enough. And they had all waited, which was awesome, so cheers guys. And we went out to a Chinese all-you-can-eat buffet, which is somewhere Ed had picked, and we went along there, and about half an hour after arriving we were sat down and I had a drink and I had some food and I began to feel human again. And I was an absolute wreck for the first half hour. It just wasn't good. It wasn't a good look at all. But thankfully I got some food in me, and that was all well. And we stayed there. It was a lovely restaurant. I think Charles came and joined us there after the rugby was over. and then we all headed back to the 281, as is the way. And I think there were 5 of us who stayed up. I think Jamie went up to bed. I think the Scottish guys, me and Ed, maybe stayed up. I think Charles maybe headed home, and we stayed up very, very late, given that it was a tournament day. I think we ended up staying up to about 2:30, 3, just sitting downstairs, having a drink and just catching up. It was really, really great. So a really lovely evening with those guys. And I was sharing the room with Jamie, so we went back up and went to sleep. So we woke up bright and early. Me and Jamie headed down, got some breakfast in the 281, had a good fry up, which was nice. And then James Long, legend that he is, just turned up at the 281 in case anyone needed a lift. So we didn't have to get a cab. James drove me, Jamie and the Scottish guys to the tournament. So cheers, James, massive thanks for that. And we got to Slayer, and everyone was unpacking their toys and saying hi and catching up. We hadn't seen a lot of the guys for a while, which was cool. And I got drawn in my first game, which is 400 points, remember, against it's going to be an awful tournament for you because I can't remember who I played. Who did I play first? It was Dan Huckfail I got drawn against, and it was domination. So this was cool because I'd never played Dan before. What was quite interesting about this tournament was it was done on a seeding basis. So your position in the league was your seeding position, which then kind of bracketed you in some way, and it meant that you were then playing in the first round people who either hadn't been to tournaments or were low down in the league. The point being that the big names would avoid each other, which is cool. It was something different. I've never seen that done before, and I was quite a big fan of that. And so I think I'm 4th in the league. I think I'm 4th in the league, but Jay Long wasn't there, so I was the 3rd seed. No, I must be 5th. I was 5th in the league, and Jay wasn't there, so I was the 4th seed. I was behind Ed, Dave Nolan, and James Long, I think. I don't know, something like that. I was 4th or 5th. So I had a protected ranking, and I got drawn against Dan Huckfail, and I remember thinking, well, this hasn't worked, because Dan's obviously, he's only been to a couple of events, and he's not high up in the league, but his army was horrible. He had something like Shagrat War Leader at 400 points, which is pretty grim, as his leader. He then had 12 Blackguard, so strength 5 to kill my ferals and my crossbows, which was horrible, and 12 Morannons to support them with a fight 4, that's also horrible, and then he had 2 Spectres for a bit of board control. So I wasn't brilliantly excited about this, but the good thing for me being that he didn't have any bows, so I did have that advantage. So we set up, we did the 5 objectives for domination, which were roughly speaking the normal layout, and I decided to bunker down on my 2 and shoot him. And my plan going into it, you always try and work out how you're going to win get the majority of VPs. My plan was keep my home objectives, claim the middle one, and wound Shagrat, and then obviously protect my leader, and then hopefully get a 7-6 win, and then even if we both broke, get 10 points, so 9 for the objectives, 1 for winning the leader, and then even if we broke, I'd be alright. That was the plan. I've just looked down and noticed that suddenly on this part of the motorway I look very dark, so I didn't say this at the start, but make sure you're not watching this and you're just doing some painting with it in the background, because I imagine it's not a particularly brilliant viewing experience. Ooh, I'm all yellow. That was my plan. So I set up quite far back. I got lucky with the rolls. I think my berserkers had to start within 12 inches, but I quickly ran them back and I hunkered down a shot. And Dan was sitting on 2 of the objectives, and I think he kind of realised that he was going to have to come forward at one point, so he started advancing towards me, and I started sending some shots off, and I managed to kill. I think I killed 1 Blackguard in the first turn, 2 in the second turn, 1 in the third turn. So I was chipping away at the Blackguard, mainly aiming for them so that I've removed the strength 5, and I was doing alright, but he was closing with me, and we got to the point where the armies were about 7 inches apart. I'd won priority and moved to 7 inches apart, so next turn we'd be in combat. And then Dan used one of his, as he was moving second, he used one of his Spectres to cast a Fell Light, is in them, or whatever it's called, on one of my crossbowmen, who then went 3 inches forward, and then Shagrat and 3 orcs jumped onto the crossbowman. and I was like, okay, we can see what's going here. They're going to heroic combat and then plough into my my guys. And I actually realised that because I hadn't seen a threat, because they were 7 inches away, my leader was at the front and relatively unexposed. So I was like, oh my, I was thinking, well, he's going to heroic combat into my leader, which is pretty awful. So we got to the fight phase, and sure enough, he called the heroic combat, killed the crossbowman. Shagrat went into my leader, which is grim, and then the three other orcs who were fighting went into a couple of ferals to attack them. I think these are all blackguard. I think they were attacking, maybe some random spears. I think he attacked 2. That was it. He had 2 blackguard in the combat and 1 spearman, and he sent the 2 blackguard into ferals, and the spearman was supporting one of them. So I was suddenly very, very worried. So I had 2 dice, Dan had 4, and Dan managed to roll a 4 highest with his 3 attack Shagrat, which caused me to jump for joy. And true, my captain stepped up to the plate and he rolled a 5. So we talked about it, and we kind of said, I'm not particularly interested in doing the blind thing, but if you'll use I'll go up to 6 and you'll go up to 6 essentially. So, and he agreed. So he used 2 points of might, and of course, in heroic combat, that was Shagrat's last might, to go up to 6, and I used 1 point. And I thought, honestly, Captain, job done. You've drawn all 3 of Shagrat's might there. Even if you die now, that's really great, because he now can't heroic strike or something if Frasco goes in. But we got to the roll off, and much to my delight and surprise, it went to me. So I won. I was like, oh, this is good. So suddenly 2 attacks on Shagrat, thinking 5's to wound, maybe I can do a cheeky little wound here. Chucked it, got a 5, brilliant. That's a fate point gone. Then Dan rolled his fate and got 1, 1, 2. Which was just awful for him, and obviously he had no might, so he couldn't do anything about it, and it was just a horrible, horrible roll. And so suddenly Shagrat is now behind my army with no might, no fate, and 2 wounds, and that was from a heroic combat, and I was pretty pleased with how that went, understandably. And even better than that, the 2 blackguard who had run into ferals both got killed. So suddenly, in the next turn, I was in a much stronger position, and I was able to use, I think I used my captain's last might point to call a heroic move and jump on Shagrat, and I trapped him and then pushed everything else forward so that he couldn't save him. And in that combat phase, I think Vrasku went in, and I think he heroic struck, so that I was guaranteed to have the higher fight value. And thankfully, I won that fight and I killed Shagrat. So that was just an awesome, awesome bonus, because that Shagrat at that points level is grim. Well, I'd managed to kill him with just with a couple of might points. He and a crossbowman, so I was well pleased with that. And then basically that now meant that he had lost a lot of his army, and I was gradually then able to start pushing back. And his 2 warbands were engaged with mine, but I was just kind of scrapping away. And because I hadn't expected to do so well, I actually then got to the point where I'd killed a lot of his guys, and I wasn't necessarily in the best position. I was sitting on one of my home objectives. The other one of mine was being contested where the fight is, and Dan was holding 2 of the middle ones, and there was no one on the one at the back. So I was actually thinking, hang on, if this gets towards ending, I'm not in trouble. And I should have said I'd broken him. And so suddenly his models can potentially run away, at which point he gets 25%, the game ends, and maybe I'm not on the objectives. So I suddenly had to have a bit of a think about that, and I sent a bunch of ferals off towards the centre objective to challenge that one, and then consolidated my one and tried to kill everyone who was on the other one of mine. And as those fights went on, I was a bit worried, but then I knew that I'd broken him and killed his leader, and I had at least 1, so I was probably alright. Dan got broken. I know he had 1 Morannan sitting on an objective who then failed his courage test, so he legged it, which is a bit unfortunate for him. And then yeah, by models running away or just killing them. One of the downsides of my army that it has held me back in the past is it can't shield or parry or anything like that. They're all 2 attack models, and so it means that if your opponent wants to die, it's very hard. It actually works against me. It's very hard to keep the game going because my models will just kill things. So I got him down to 25%, and in the end he was holding the objective in the middle, so he got 3 victory points. I'd broken him, I'd killed his leader, I was holding one of my home objectives, that was 9, and I had more models around the other home objective than he had, so I got a 10-3 victory in the end. And I was great. I was pleased to get off to a win, particularly against a tough army, which I thought very much had the tools to beat me potentially. But yeah, it was a great game. Dan was a top bloke, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, good start. I've just noticed again how dark I am on this part of the motorway that hasn't got any lighting. So again, hopefully you're just listening to this for the audio, and it's not. Please don't complain about the visuals, because this is an audio video, not a video. So, another thing about this tournament, which I have to say I really liked, was the fact that even though there were 400-point games, we were given 2 hours to play, and that is I don't want to say too long, but it's a very long time for a 400-point game. And but what that meant is that all the games were very relaxed. The atmosphere of them was great because no one was rushing to finish them, and all the games were going to have their natural finish, which is fantastic. Because one of the things I really hate at tournaments is when games end because of the time limit rather than because the game ended. It can sometimes be very frustrating. So me and Dan had a very casual game, a lot of chatting, a lot of laughing, and I think we finished after about an hour. So then meant we had an hour to go through and catch up with people, and I really liked that. So tournaments can, if you haven't gone to a tournament, you might not necessarily get this, it sounds strange, but they can be very stressful and very tiring, and having that downtime was great. So you could go back and have a cup of tea with your opponent and chat about the game and see how everyone else was getting on. We then had lunch, which was the Cobb shop near Mansfield. I'm calling that because I've been affected. It's like a sandwich shop round the back. I went around there and had a really good fresh chicken bacon club sandwich, and then we came back for game 2. And obviously I knew I had a win, so I was likely to be playing. You're getting to the point where you're playing winners, and so your game should be getting harder. And I got drawn against Mr. Owen Wright, which I was very pleased about because Owen's a top bloke and I haven't played him in ages. And it was Lords of Battle, which is a good scenario for me. Lords of Battle is something that my Uruks do very well at because they can kill a lot with crossbows for relatively little damage themselves, and then they can kill a lot in combat of the weakened army. And Owen's army, I have to admit, and he'll be fine with saying this, it didn't necessarily fill me with dread. He had Gwai here as his leader, with the Alfred upgrade, as people call it. So he had Alfred to give Gwai here more might, which is scary at 400 points. But because that was so many points, he then only had I think he had 4 Long the Fat on horse, Angmor, and about 12 fiefdoms troops. He had some clansmen and lambdons, some axemen, and a couple of men at arms. So it wasn't a lot of models, and it was just Gwai here that I was worried about. So we got started, and Alfred gave Gwai here 3 might, which is fair enough. I think if you're playing against Alfred, you've got to expect 3 might, and if he gets more, it's annoying, and if he gets less, you're lucky. But three's the average. But suddenly then I've got a 4 might monster to take down, which I was very worried about. And he sent Gwai here around the side while his guys came forward. I fired my crossbows at the defence 4 clansmen at the back, and I think over a couple of turns I was able to kill a few of them. I think it wasn't fantastic. It wasn't too bad, but I killed 2 or 3 of those. So I was chipping away at the numbers there, which is good. And Gwai here kind of moved in, and I think he charged me first, and I managed to get, I want to say 3 of my 2 attack models onto him. So he was trapped, but he had 4 might. So my plan was to draw some might. Oh no, that was it. I charged him basically. I didn't have to, and I knew that I'd probably lose a couple of guys, but I was just hoping to draw some might out so that he was a bit weak. Essentially sacrifice a couple of berserkers so that he was a bit weaker for later in the game. And I charged in, thinking, as Owen picked up his dice, just thinking to myself, please roll a 5, please roll a 5, don't get a 6, use some might. And as he picked up the dice and chucked them across the table, I was delighted, and he was horrified to see that he rolled a 3 highest on his 2 dice, which was galling. And sure enough, I then got the 6 on mine. So Owen was essentially facing 12 attacks, needing 6s to wound, some of them fainting, or using 3 of his might. And of course he made the right call and used the use the 3 might to win the fight. So suddenly the 4 might Gwai here was back down to a 1 might Gwai here, and I was thrilled with that. And I think he hurled one of the Uruks, and maybe into a couple, maybe killed a couple. He knocked my leader down, I remember that. My leader was going in there to heroic strike against him, but he definitely knocked him down. So that was huge for me. And I think it was about then that the men-at-arms got in and we started having a fight, like, so my ferals and crossbows were fighting against his men-at-arms. And of course the weight of numbers there was pretty telling. And Forlong the Fat, who was mounted, charged into someone, called a heroic combat, just to try and kill some more warriors. Won the fight, and he was fighting, I think he was fighting one guy, one crossbowman, and he knocked him down. So he's now got 3 pairs of attacks. First, and he needs 4s to wound him, strength 5, defense 5. First pair of attacks, 3 and 1. Second pair of attacks, 2 and 1. Third pair of attacks, 3 and 2. And so I couldn't believe it, the dice. So that was 8 dice and a 3 highest over those combats from Owen there, which wasn't great. But what it meant was that Owen then had to use another might point just to kill the guy so that he could move on. So he did that, killed him, and then charged into 2 crossbowmen. He won that fight, knocked both of them down, but again only killed 1. He didn't have to use might this time, but despite having kind of 6 chances to wound, he only rolled 1 4+. So rolling to wound against my crossbowman with Forlong, he had 12 attacks and he rolled 1 4+, which was pretty horrible for him. And it also meant he was down to 1 might, which was huge. So this went on. The next turn I charged into Gwahir. I think my leader couldn't get in because he'd been knocked down. This time it was then that Gwahir kind of woke up and decided to start fighting. I think he got a 5. I think he had to use his last might point, so he won again, hurled me, killed a couple of guys, knocked my captain down, so he was 3 inches. He was more than 3 inches away. Next turn, charged Gwahir. I think Owen was broken by this point, and I think I'd killed the heroes, or maybe I trapped Forlong and killed him. I think killed Angbor. So it was kind of just a few guys in Gwahir. Gwahir charged into a bunch of guys, got a 6 naturally this time, and my leader had still been on the floor, so I couldn't get into strike, so 1, killed a bunch of guys. Oh, he barged, that was it. At one turn he barged and charged into my leader, which was awful, and then won against my leader and rended him, and I think he took his fate and took a wound, so did 2 wounds on my leader, which was pretty awful. I'll tell you where I got a might point back. It was Frasco who killed Forlong because he got a might point back for doing it, because it was Lords of Battle. So that's how Forlong went down, using the fight 5 of Frasco. And so by this point, it was getting to. It's Lords of Battle. Oh yeah, that was it. So he got my leader down to. It must have been one more turn. He charged in, this time fighting my leader, and he didn't kill my leader. Is that right? Yeah, that was it. Sorry. He charged in on the turn that he was broken. He charged into the leader, killed my leader, getting a might point back, and then because he'd been broken, we rolled the dice at the end of the game, and he rolled a 1, and the game ended. And we kind of, it was almost a bit frustrating because he'd finally got a might point on Gwai here, so we could do some damage. So for a laugh, we decided to play on and have another turn. And because he was broken, we decided he had to do courage tests, and Owen rolled snake eyes for Gwai here. So I had to use his new might point and a will point just to stay in it, just to stay in the game. And then I think he had 3 guys left, and they all ran. So it was then Gwahir against my army, a mightless Gwahir. And I think he charged in, got a 6 and killed some guys, and then we played another turn, and I think he didn't get the 6, and I cut him down. So we played it to right to the end, to see the natural conclusion and see how much Gwahir could do. But sadly, rolling the snake eyes for his courage test had really put paid to any kind of resistance that he could mount. which is a bit of a shame for the fun, for the kind of narrative, but obviously the damage had been done. So we carried the score up after the game had actually ended, and it ended with there were no leader points, but I had broken Owen without being broken, and I'd inflicted 21 wounds, I think it was. So I think I got 24 and Owen had done 10. So I think I won that game 24-10. But it was great. Owen wasn't there to kind of compete. He was having a laugh with a kind of fun fiefdoms army that was pretty cool. So I really enjoyed it. He's a top guy to play against. Lots and lots of fun. And just thank God Guy here rolled 3s for that comeback, because otherwise it could have been very, very different. So yeah, that was game 2, and now I'm on 2 wins, and you know, there's a long way to go. There's still another 4 games, but I was sticking to my game plan. You know, I was like, okay, I needed to win all 3 on day 1, so I've got a chance here. And I got then drawn against Mr. Dave Nolan, and I think probably I'm not sure if we were first and second at that point in the tournament, maybe not, but yeah, I got drawn against Dave, and the game was Seize the Prize, and it's a modified version of Seize the Prize where you have to get the prize off your opponent's table edge, and it's a much better version of Seize the Prize. It's got proper and it's 25% when to end. It doesn't end when one side gets the prize off. You can get leader kills and breaking kills. And I went into this feeling pretty good, but wary. Because Ed, I must have Fellbeast on the brain. Dave had the Undying on a Fellbeast as his leader, which is pretty horrible. Having a Fellbeast at 400 points is no fun at all, but it also meant that he didn't have a lot of other points. So the rest of his army was Sharku on a Warg, leading, I think it was 11 Berserkers and 1 Warg Rider. So I significantly outnumbered him, but he had a Fellbeast. But my army is pretty good at taking down Fellbeasts, and it's obviously Seize the Prize, so I thought if I can get onto it, that's okay. And I also, I decided I wanted to prioritise getting rid of the 2 Wargs, Sharkus and the Warg Rider, so that he couldn't, to try and limit, I didn't want him passing it to a Warg and then running off with it. So the game began, and I set my crossbowmen back a bit at the side where they could shoot at Dave's army. I rushed forward, Dave rushed forward. I think I called a heroic march. Dave sent his 2 Warg Riders and his Fellbeast forward. So all those models were about 3 inches away from each other. In the shoot phase, I did really well. I managed to kill the Warg Rider, kill the Warg, killed Sharku's Warg, and I think I took a Fate and a Might. He used a Might to pass the Fate off Sharku. So that was great. It removed 2 of his fast moving models and got rid of a Might point. So I was very, very happy with that result. And then at the start of next turn, it came down to the inevitably incredibly important roll-off. So there was a heroic move roll-off. If I win it, I get to go over the prize, get a chance to dig it up, probably kill Sharku, and I get to swamp the Fellbeast and probably kill it, I would say. I would be able to get fight 5 in there, so it'd be tied fight. He'd only have 2 attacks. I'd have loads and loads of attacks, so the very worst it'd be a roll-off, but I had a very good chance of killing the Fellbeast and getting the Undying off it, which would be huge for the game going forward. Rolled the dice, and it came up with Dave, and quite rightly Dave gave a hell of a shout when he saw it, because it was a huge, huge roll-off, but he managed to win that. So I was like, I could see that as a huge, huge chance, even though it was only turn 2. That was a big, big moment in the game. So Dave then, I think he might have cast a spell with the Undying, I can't remember, but he moved the Undying back behind his warriors, pushed all his warriors up that were caught by the heroic move, so he got a Berserker onto the prize. So I was like, okay, so he gets a chance to dig it up, but I then had a chance to charge him, so I wasn't hugely concerned at this point. And he dug the prize up on the first time of asking, so that was another 50-50 that went to Dave. That was like, oh god, that was huge, that was absolutely huge. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but he had moved his Fellbeast behind that Berserker, an inch behind. So I then went, okay, well, fair enough, here goes nothing. So charged forward with all my guys, and my leader with his Urukai captain went into the Berserker holding the prize, and we fought, and I won the fight against him. He backed away. I needed a 5 to kill him on 2 dice, and I didn't do it, which was the third thing in that turn that had horribly gone against me. And that then meant that, quite cleverly, Dave was able to back away an inch into base contact with the Fell Beast. And because my captain had used his might to march and his might to heroic move, I had no might to challenge him next turn. So next turn, I can't honestly remember if I got priority or Dave did. I think maybe I got it and Dave had to heroic move, but of course he did heroic move, and first thing he did was, I think he heroic moved with Shaku, and so the Berserker passed the prize to the Fell Beast. The Fell Beast then flew 12 inches over my army. I ran, knowing that that was all that mattered, I ran a bunch of guys back towards it. I did a heroic march with Vrasku to try and bring him over to get a bit closer. We were having a big scrap in the middle with the Berserkers because I was trying to break him. That you could get some victory points for breaking him, so I was doing that, which was going reasonably well, I suppose. I was doing alright in that, but I was losing more than I thought I would. It's one of those things, you have 2 Berserkers against 1 Berserker and Dave gets a 6 and then wins the roll off, and so it's not, you know, it's not unreasonable, but it's just, oh, I should have won those. But the next turn came around, and even though I'm within range of the Fell Beast, I knew it was kind of irrelevant because the Undying then called a heroic move himself. I couldn't challenge it at all, and he flew further away from my army. And then basically in the next turn he had 1 might point left, and he called a heroic move again to move where, essentially to the corner of my table edge, where he was completely unassailable, and couldn't do anything about it. I think I fired off a few kind of cursory pot shots at him with the crossbows, but they just didn't achieve anything, like, quite rightly so. And so in the next turn, Dave moved the Fell Beast off the table, and because that was his leader, he scored 5 points for moving the prize off my table edge, and because his leader had left the table, the most I could get was 3. So we played on for for pride, as it were, and I did manage to break Dave without being broken. So I got the 3 victory points, and I think, I mean, it ends at 25%, so it ended with Dave with a couple of Berserkers left. I think he had like 1 model left in the last turn, but of course it was irrelevant. They'd done the job, and the Fell Beast had got off. So it was cool. Like, Dave was nice to play against. He used his army very well. He knew what he was doing, but it was galling. It's one of those. I don't like it's a better version of Seize the Prize, but I don't like that you can hand it to a flying model still. I think even giving it to a cavalry model is alright, because the cavalry model has to be control zones and you can kind of block it, but when a flying model can just leap over you, it was just harsh. And I don't know, as soon as I don't like those games where 5 turns before the end of the game you realise you can't win. It was that sort of thing. As soon as the Berserker backed away into the Fell Beast, I was like, well, that's it, the game's over. So there were three things that really turned it. There was a heroic move roll-off, there was Dave digging up the prize on the first turn of asking, and then my leader not killing his the guy holding the prize. If any one of them had gone my way, it could have been a different game. But c'est la vie, it happens. My biggest mistake, I think, on reflection, was depending too much on the crossbows, because where they were out on the side, they never had an impact, and Vrasku, crucially, his might never happened. I never got to use it. At the end of the game, Vrasku still had 2 might left, I think, and had he been in the middle, I then would have been able to challenge with heroic moves all 3 turns where Dave moved the Fell Beast, and hopefully I would have got one of those, and so could have potentially charged it. And because I'd killed the rest of the Berserkers, if I had done that, that could have again very easily been a different game. So that was frustrating for me, because that was my mistake, like putting Vrasku out there and, you know, thinking my leader's 2 might would be enough when I used 1 to heroic march. It was an obvious mistake, but hey, you live and you learn. And so I lost game 3, which was the last game of the day, and I must admit at that point I thought, well, that's my chances gone. As I said, I thought I needed to win all the games on day 1 to have a chance, and I was like, well, I think I'm pretty much out of it now. But it was a good day. I was quite pleased with how the army had done. As I said, I could have won that game, the last game, if a couple of dice rolls had gone differently. So as galling as it was, it wasn't really anything wrong with the army. You know, I wasn't hugely thinking, you know, this couldn't have won that. I had a very good chance in that game, but alas, couldn't take it. But so yeah, that was the end of day one, and again, a great game against Dave. Really enjoyed it. Very, very nice. And it was very relaxed because of the time limits, and so we headed off to have dinner. But before we did that, we watched the doubles. Some of the guys were playing a board game, and the Davis Cup was on, so I put the doubles match, the Murray brothers, on, and streamed that and watched that for about half an hour and got to see them win, which was awesome. So well done. And of course, we then went on to win the Davis Cup semi-finals. So that was cool. So we went out and we went to the Mint, of course, which is where we always go, curry restaurant, which is lovely. Really, really like it. Ends up with tip and everything, ends up being 15 quid for like a 4-course meal, which is awesome. So we went there, and I was sitting with Tanya and Charles and James and Owen and Jamie. They were my kind of 5 people around me. I just had a really nice evening, good food, nice conversation, just catching up on everyone, seeing how the games went. So I was obviously sitting with people that I hadn't played that day, so that was quite cool, hearing all their war stories. And then again, almost inevitably, we headed back to the 281, and there was a fairly big group of us. That's become even though it's the B&B, that's definitely the bar of choice now, it seems, in the evenings, because it's very chilled out and they always look after us there. So headed back to that, and we sat in the bar and we played a game called, it's spelt co-op, but I think is it meant to be coup? I think it's meant to be pronounced coup, but it's a game where you play in teams, and you all get dealt a card, and so if there's 8 of you, 3 of you are spies and 5 of you are part of the resistance. And obviously the spies know who they are, but the resistance don't know who the spies are, and you have to play this game and try and get on missions, and the spies have to try and get themselves on missions and then fail the missions, so that the team fails, and the resistance team have to work out who the spies are. And it's really, really good fun. There's about sort of 8 to 10 of us playing that at any one time, and it's really, really good laugh, and I think I'm going to pick that up. I think it was Alan Liddell who brought that along. It was really, really good, really enjoyed it. And so I might have to get that a go. And I think we weren't up nearly as late that time, but we were getting a bit tired. I obviously had the long drive and the late night the night before, and I think me and Jamie headed up to bed at about 11ish or something. And Jamie told me that I fell asleep incredibly quickly, and I was pretty much asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. So that was good. Awesome first day. Absolutely loved it. Really, really good fun, and cool to be playing a very high stakes small tournament for a day. The last one I think was the season opener, which was 350 points, and that was obviously way back in January. And I think since then I think there might have been a 500 point tournament, but there's not been a 400 point tournament. So it was a very different meta. It was interesting to see what people have brought along. So yeah, there we go. I presume we're about halfway through this video, and what am I doing? I can't actually see how long it's been. Oh, I'm all dark again, aren't I? So it's been, I've gone about, what was I say? It was 108, wasn't it? 46 miles. So that's probably been about half an hour, 35 minutes on the video, something like that, so it's not too bad. So thank you guys if you are sticking with me. Thanks for keeping me company. This is helping the journey pass for me, so I really appreciate it. But yeah, sorry it's just so dark, but hopefully you're getting lots of painting done. So, day 2. So we woke up again fairly early, didn't have any trouble with the alarms or anything. Jamie's a very early riser anyway, so you're always pretty safe if you're staying with him. Got up about 9ish or something, half 8ish maybe, and headed down to breakfast. And yeah, head down to breakfast, had another great breakfast, sort of eggs and bacon and stuff at 281, it's always very nice. Went up, grabbed all our stuff, had breakfast with Scottish guys again, went up, grabbed all our stuff, checked out, and headed round to Slayer. I was very interested to see how this day went. As I said at the start, I wasn't particularly confident with a 600 point army. I didn't think it was brilliantly optimised or anything, but equally I was fairly confident in the numbers I had. That was the kind of interest to me, that I had 36 models, which was a lot, given that, what, 22 of them were 2 attack models, 2 attack warriors, and I had 13 shots, crossbow shots, including Frasco. So I was actually thinking, this might do alright. As much as I don't have the wizard, just trust in the troops. That was the plan. So my first game was against Callum Farbrother, and I knew this the night before, but I didn't know what scenario I was playing. And we had, at this point, blockade, the hold ground variant, or what was the other one I played today? God, things I should know. Reconnoiter. They were the choices available, and Callum had a goblin horde. He had about 50 goblins. Recon's the worst scenario for my army every time. I hate it. Doesn't suit it at all. It's built on crossbows which can't move and fire, and it's not got big numbers. And he had a goblin horde, so I really didn't want to play him at recon. I thought I'd have it if we got blockade and he was trying to get off, I could shoot derbs and so do well at that. So I was thinking that would be good for me, and I didn't want to play him at whole ground, because obviously at whole ground against 60 model army, that isn't going to be any good. But it rocked up and it was the hold ground variant, and I was like, oh, this isn't great. But because it was a variant, I did have a chance. So this was the contest, I think it's called Contest of Champions. It's the one that I believe James wrote for his league finale last year. What basically happens is you, at the start of the game, you put your two leaders in combat in the middle of the table, and those guys then fight, and they have to charge each other. They have to keep fighting. You can put other models in with them, but they have to keep fighting. And if and when one of them kills the other one's body then becomes the hold ground objective. So, and the victory points were, if your leader wounded the enemy leader, you got 1, and if your leader killed the enemy leader and he had to do all the wounds on him, you got 3. So if any one of your other models killed the leader, you didn't get anything for it. You also got points for breaking the enemy and not being broken. I think it was 3 and 1. And at the end of the game, if you had more models than the enemy around, if the objective was contested, there were models on both sides, but you had more, you got 3 victory points, and if there were just your models, you got 5. So this helped me in the sense that you wouldn't get a point for every model, which would really hinder me against the goblins. You know, it was just having more. So even if he had more, if I'd killed him and broken him, I could still win that. So that was good. And also, because it was whole ground, I knew there was a very good chance of his army getting split up, which would also help me. And I actually have to say, I think I got quite lucky on deployment, or more to the point, Callum got unlucky. And basically, he had 4 warbands, I believe. No, he had 5 warbands, and there was basically 1 deployed, roughly speaking, in the middle of every table edge, and then one of the long table edges had 2 warbands. So we had kind of 12 goblins, 12 goblins, 12 goblins, and 24 goblins, which was perfect for me, because it meant that kind of the shamans were, you know, he only had fury in 2 areas, which was good, as opposed to the big blob of goblins. And, you know, if I attacked some of these warbands, then I could get to the heroes, the shamans, a lot easier than if you had a big battle line. So that was cool. And basically, I set up my crossbowmen fighting against 1 goblin warband with Ashrak. I sent my shaman with 10 of my Fururkas against a goblin shaman and about 12 goblins. And I sent my 12 leaders warband models, so no leader over there because he was in the middle, the 12 berserkers and ferals I sent against the other 2 goblin warbands. That was Groblog, Ashrak, and about 20 goblins. And each of the goblin warbands had a spider. I think there were 5 spiders. So there's 5 spiders running around. And meanwhile, our general setup, and as I think I said at the start of the video, the reason I took the defense 7 general was for this scenario. I thought it was the only one who stood a chance against other leaders, and I was really worried. You know, looking around the boards, there was obviously Gwai here as a leader, there was a couple of goblin kings, there was a lot of things that I wouldn't have a chance against, but Durbers was alright. I was thinking, okay, this one my general could actually take, which was pretty cool. So we started, and I think first turn, if you imagine then all around the board, these sets of warbands just smash into each other. So the matchups are just aside, make kind of 3 three kind of big fights. If the screen here in front of me is the board, there was a fight going on at the top, in the middle of the top, there was a fight going on in the middle of the bottom, and there's a fight going on in the middle of the side. And on the other short edge, there were just 8 goblins and a spider walking towards the table, walking towards the centre, because I had no one to oppose them with. So I think Callum Heroic struck in the first turn, but I still managed to win the fight, and my leader managed to wound Durbers, but he saved it was a fate point. I think he might have had to use a might point to pass it, so maybe Durbers was down to 1 might, while I hadn't used any, so that was pretty good. And in the fights, my berserkers fighting the Shaman's Warband started to do really well and killed a good proportion of them. My crossbowmen and Vrasku against the Gundabad Shaman and the Goblins didn't do as well. Obviously they're crossbows, they wanted to have, but still the numbers were about even and I had the higher fight value, but things just kind of swung there a bit, which was a bit frustrating. And I started to lose a few crossbowmen. His Gundabad Shaman shattered Vrasku's weapons, which was a big deal, and obviously meant that Vrasku was at -1 to dual rules or -1 to wound for the rest of the game, which was pretty awful. And then at the top, where there was something like 12 Berserkers fighting against 24 Goblins, this was a real stalemate. It was a really interesting fight, because obviously he had the big numbers up there, but my 2 attacks and fight value were helping me. And I was killing a lot of Goblins. I didn't have Fury there, he did. And he was killing a few Berserkers, and we were chipping away at each other. And a real early breakthrough for me in turn 2 or 3, it might have been a bit later, but I was able to kill Groblog. Because I'd come on at the back of his warband, I was able to use my Ferucas to kind of shield the fight, and I killed Groblog, which then meant that his Fury, whilst he still had it, it was only 6 up saves, so that was a big help, as well as removing some of the might from the board, so that was good. And meanwhile, in the middle, over a couple of turns, my captain won the fight twice more, and I was like, yes, this is good, this is good, this is good. Rolled to wound against Durbers and failed all 4, so four rolls across 2 turns, needing 5s to wound, didn't get any. I was like, oh, you're kidding me. So, and by this point, 2 spiders were kind of approaching my leader, and I was like, that isn't good, that is not good. They only need 5s to wound him, and that's more dice in the fight. So I'd started diverting there was this really interesting game of kind of asset management and resource management for both of us, where we were constantly then thinking, well, how many guys do I need at this fight, how many guys do I need in this area and this area. And so because I've been doing quite well with my Shaman's Warband against his Shaman's Warband, I started sending Berserkers and Ferals into the middle to kind of help my leader out, but of course they were still maybe 4 turns away from getting there. But I was sending them in, and I was sending some of my crossbowmen in to kind of help him out as well, which then meant that even more of my crossbowmen who got left behind died, because they were getting kind of swamped by these goblins. And then, having failed to wound Durbers twice, he then got a turn where he was able to get Durbers, a spider, and I think 3 goblins all onto my leader, which was pretty horrible. And I think in one of those fights I shielded and won and knocked everyone back, which was great. But then, and I was basically, I had to kill him with my leader, so you might be wondering why I was shielding, but I was essentially thinking, I've just got to stay alive until the Berserkers get here to help me out. And then the next turn I shielded again, and he won. I seem to remember, I think he rolled a 5 highest, and I had the higher fight value. And I was like thinking, okay, this is good, all I need is a 5. And I think when shielding with 4 dice, I rolled a 3 highest, and I only had 1 might left, so I couldn't do anything, and it was horrendous. So he then got to strike, and I think he had about 8 or 9 attacks, and I was really panicking, and he didn't wound with any of them at all, and I couldn't believe it. And it really paid off having it. It was the defense 7 hero, and it really worked, and it kept me in it, and I was just delighted and relieved. And so by this point, I think today our rounds were about 2 hours 20 minutes or something, and by this point some of the games had finished, And a lot of guys were coming over and having a look at the table and were amazed to see that both our leaders were still alive and they hadn't even done a wound on each other. So of course what normally happens in this is after about 2 or 3 turns, one leader's dead. And we hadn't even touched each other. No, people come around going, how are they still alive? How is this happening? And we're just like, I don't know, it's awesome. And it was such good fun. It was really good seeing this duel play out. And so yeah, it kind of went on. And me over by the Shaman's warband, I was able to kill most of them except the Shaman and send everyone back into the middle. Over with Ashrak's like 2 warbands now, I was beginning to win and like turn the tide and kind of even up the numbers to about 1-on-1, which suits me down to the ground. So that was going well. There was one spider there that I couldn't kill, which was frustrating, and then down at the bottom it wasn't going well with my crossbowman. Frascu took a lot of damage from, I think it was a spider, because a spider charged him, and because he was -1 to hit, -1 to his dual rolls, he lost the fight and he took a wound and went down to 1 wound, no fate, which is pretty horrible. And so these 8 goblins had kind of come in, the ones from the side who were unopposed, and meanwhile he was sending up goblins behind my crossbowmen while my crossbowmen were going up towards the middle, and I was sending my berserkers in. And thankfully, I think that turn I just described where the captain held on and didn't get wounded was the turn before my berserkers arrived. And so then the berserkers arrived, and whilst it was not set in stone by any means, that then meant he couldn't swamp my leader anymore, because I had the berserkers to take those guys off. So I started to kill some of the guys he had in the middle, and meanwhile the 2 generals kind of went on. And I got to say, by this point the game had attracted a fairly huge crowd. It had been going on for a very long time and there was a lot of people watching it, and it was just incredibly cinematic, and we were having such a laugh, and it was clearly hanging completely in the balance. Because the crazy thing about it was, we were starting to talk about the potential that if our leaders didn't kill each other, then there was no objective, so there were no victory points for that. So I think I was incredibly close to breaking Callum, and he was getting close to breaking me. So we were looking at potentially 1-1 there, and then the only other way to get any points was to wound the leader. So I was now getting a bit desperate, thinking I just need to wound his leader and try and win 2-1. And then, you know, and maybe there wouldn't be any victory points for being in the middle, because there wouldn't be a dead general, which is kind of bizarre to think. But as it turned out, when my berserkers got in and were able to take off everyone around him and have another round of fighting, and to make matters worse, the Gundabad Shaman did a roll and a half where he had 1 will point left, and he cast a shatter against my leader, who obviously has to, you know, he needs his weapons because he's trying to wound the Davers, and he rolled a 2 to cast it, needing a 3. So I celebrated, and then he used his last might point to turn it into a 3, so Callum celebrated. Thankfully my leader still had his will point, so I was like, this is alright, and I chucked it and got a 1. So, you know, it wasn't insane, it was a 1 in 3 chance, but I was like, oh, come on. So my leader has his weapon shattered, so he's now trying to wound Durbers, -1 in the duel, and -1 to wound. And again, I want to reiterate, if I kill Durbers with anyone else, I don't get any victory points for it. So I was like, oh, this is awful. So I then fought him 1-on-1, and I think maybe he won but didn't wound me. You know, he's strength 4, I'm defense 7, so I wasn't too worried. But yeah, so that kind of went on for another turn, and in the and then I broke him, I think, and that then meant that some of the goblins up the top that were around Ashrag kind of ran away. A few other goblins around, but he passed a lot of courage tests. I think he had 5 goblins who were near the middle who wanted to charge in on my guys, and 4 of them passed their courage test. I was like, come on, I need this. And at this point, of course, all he's trying to do is break me, because if he breaks me, it's a 1-1 draw, and I'm desperately trying to wound Durbers. And I managed to, in 1 turn, get a berserker, my shaman, and my captain on Durbers, and kind of unsurprisingly, I won the fight. So he was trapped, and I had 4 attacks. I had 4 attacks from my leader because he was trapped, needing needing 6s. They normally need 5s. He was at -1 because he was unarmed. So they're needing 6s to do it. And I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. So I rolled them and I got 1 6, which I screamed in joy with. And again, there was a huge crowd around here all laughing. It was really nice that we were both playing. There was a lot of people watching, and it was very, very tense, and it obviously had a big impact on the tournament because we were both doing well, but there was never any chance for saying, look, can you go away, guys, because it was such a fun game to watch. And a lot of people came by going, this is a really good, like, spectator game, essentially, because it was all the armies were so split up, and it was really interesting tactically. And so I got that 1 wound, and I started screaming in joy before Callum reminded me that he had 1 fate point remaining. And I was like, oh no, please, no. And he chucked his fate and he got a 1. So I inflicted a wound on Durbers with my leader, getting me a victory point. I was like, yes! And then I started thinking about it, and the odds of me doing another wound with him were just too remote. So the Berserker just struck him and killed him. So I didn't get 3 for killing him with my leader, but I got 1 for wounding him with my leader. And I think that was the turn I broke as well. So it was currently 2-1 to me. And I was like, yes, that's it, I've won it. Because he can't get any victory points from my leader. And I was celebrating. But then, of course, I realised what then came into play was now, and this was at least an hour and a half into the game, we now had an objective. So suddenly those VPs mattered, and suddenly you then had to start thinking about 25%. And we're like, oh my god, this changes everything. And thankfully by this point I'd moved a few guys into the centre to, you know, a few berserkers from the outsides, and my shaman was in there as well. So the next turn his Gundabad shaman passed his courage test for being broken, which meant that his standfast kept everyone in it, and my fury kept all of my guys in it. And we had this big clash in the middle where everything that could rushed into the centre, and we fought all the fights around the edge first. So my berserker finally killed the shaman who was up on the far side at long last, and then a few around the top where Ashrak had been, a few berserkers killed a few goblins, and what that meant was Callum was reduced to 25%. So we knew that the game would end this turn. And just to reiterate, I was 2-1 up at this stage. We were both broken, and I'd done a wound on his leader with my leader. And so we got to the fights in the middle, and we counted up before the combat phase, and there were 10 models each in the middle, which was amazing, and most of them were in combat. So this meant if at the end of it, if Callum had more models, he'd get 3 victory points and win 4-2. And if I had more models, I'd get 3 victory points and win 5-1. And suddenly, from feeling like, I don't know, like looking at the board, I was feeling pretty confident and I just killed his leader, but I was suddenly very, very, very aware that this could slip away. So I tried to do as best as I could to kind of make the combats favourable, and my leader, a berserker and a shaman were all on one of the spiders, so that my leader's fight 5 would win it. The spider rolled a 6, of course, at which point I put down my leader's dice because he couldn't win it because he was at -1, and I didn't get the 6, and then he killed the feral. But then I think the feral stayed alive because of fury, which is great. But that was huge because that was a spider I could have killed. Then I think another spider killed a feral, making it like 10-9 to Callum. And then I remember it coming down to there were 4 one-on-ones, or kind of little fights. There was a crossbowman against a goblin, and the crossbowman won and I think killed. There was a berserker against 2, and then 2 berserkers against 1 goblin. And I can't remember the exact order of those things, but basically they kind of went my way, thankfully, in the most terrifying of manners. And by the end of the combat phase, I had 9 in the middle and Callum had 7. So he had managed to kill 1 and I'd killed 3, and secured the middle by the skin of my teeth. I mean, it couldn't have been closer. So I ended up controlling the middle and getting a 5-1 victory. And I think I've talked about that game longer than I've talked about it in the others. It feels like that. And I don't think I've explained a fraction of it. It went on. It was the absolute validation of having the long games, because it meant the game was played out to its natural conclusion rather than being cut off by time. It was so much fun. I loved it, and it was hands down one of the best games of SPG I've ever played. It was brilliant. Callum was a top bloke. I've never played him before, and I absolutely loved it. And Callum essentially in those 2 hours, Callum just walked straight into automatic most sporting for me, or like favourite game, because nothing to do with my other opponents, but just that game was absolutely brilliant, and I loved it. And I'd like to think it's always easier to say when you win, but I'd like to think I wouldn't have complained if I'd lost, because it was so close, and Callum played it so well, and there was so many swings in, like the duel between the two heroes like had gone on far longer than anyone else's. Like everyone else's hero was long dead by the time ours did their first wound on each other, and it was absolutely epic. This Durbers against this Uruk captain who was dubbed Harold, and it was just fantastic. I loved it, and it was just brilliant. So a great guy to play against, and a brilliant game, and kind of more importantly for me, a win with my 600-point army against a goblin horde at whole ground. So yeah, I was really chuffed with that. I was very pleased with how I played it. I thought tactically I did the right thing when I got to pick where some of his warbands came on and kind of paired them up. I took risks, but they kind of paid off, and yeah, I was pleased with how it went. So at that point we paused for lunch, and we went and played, I think then we were playing Love Letter, weren't we? Maybe that was before the last game, but there was a lot of card games going. That was again the nice thing, that because there were a lot of gaps in between games, people were just playing games through at the other area with the tables and chairs, so just different card games were going on. A game called Splendor was being played, so that was really cool. Everyone was just chatting, and again you just had lots of time to relax and kind of think about the games and how things were going. And so that left us with Blockade and Recon, neither of which I was brilliantly confident about. And I'd also noted that in day one, the other reason I didn't particularly rate my chances is in day one, I'd dodged a lot of horrible armies. There were 3 Rivendell Knight armies I didn't fancy playing, and there was an all Fellbeast army, and there was David Reed's Harad with a Fellbeast, and I didn't fancy playing any of those really, and I dodged them all on day one when I had my better army, I thought. So I knew that I'd be playing at least 1, maybe 2 of these on day 2 with a worse army. And sure enough, for game 5 my luck finally ran out, and I was drawn against James Braund and his Rivendell Knights, and the scenario was Blockade. So this was an interesting one. Blockade doesn't normally come up at a tournament, so I hadn't played it in a long time. But so if you haven't played it, it's the one from Desolation of Smaug sourcebook, and you basically have one army trying to get their leader off the board, and the other army trying to kill their leader. So my choices, you roll a dice to see who gets to pick, being the attacker or defender. So you know what my army is, it's all foot. James's army is 2 Rivendell Knight captains, 10 Rivendell Knights, and Saruman, I believe. Saruman the White, maybe some more Rivendell Knights, maybe 12 Rivendell Knights. I want to say he had 13 models, I can't actually remember. Something like that. It's a very, very good army. And I can either try and get my leader off the board, so walking across 48 inches and getting him off, or try and track down the Rivendell Knight captain and kill him. And you might say that I would be better off walking off, but rather than trying to catch an all-mounted army, but there was no way my leader would get off. I was thinking about this, and 48 inches, they start, I think the leader starts on the board edge, so he has to walk 48 inches, the length of the board, which if he's unopposed is what? Like 48 is going to be 8 turns, so maybe 9 turns if he's unopposed, let alone any combats. And in that, with James, with all his shots, he could just pincushion my leader, and all Saruman could just blast him and compel him and all this sort of stuff. And I just thought, there is no way a 2 wound, 1 fate, defense 7 Uruk captain is getting off. So I thought, all right, I'll have to catch him. So I won the roll off, and I chose to be the attacker trying to stop his army. So the way this would work is you could get 3 points for breaking the enemy and 1 point if you broke them and were unbroken. If I killed James's Rivendell Knight captain, I'd get 3 points. If I wounded him, I'd get 1 point. And if James got his captain off the board, he'd get 3 points, and if you got him off the board but he was wounded, he'd get 1 point. So breaking mattered, and James's leader mattered. So I definitely think purely on that, there's a bit of an advantage to the attacker, because my leader doesn't matter. He's essentially expendable. And so, another little caveat was, because we were playing on 4x4 rather than 6x4 boards, James couldn't heroic march, as he's meant to start in blockade. He's meant to start another kind of 2 foot away, but you know, to offset that, he couldn't heroic march. So I can start on any of the 3 table edges, and I basically took a punt and just deployed everything on the far table edge, because I did think about trying to put some on the edges, but then I thought, as soon as I put, if you imagine he's on north and I'm on south, as soon as I put anything on the east or west board edge, it will just ride towards the other side, and outrun them, and then be fighting half my army. So I just deployed a huge long line, like 38 models long, across the board, the back of the board, and it nearly filled it. There's actually, if you're interested, go and have a look on, if you search the GBHL Facebook page, I think if you search in the thin pink line, it'll come up. But I took this photo of just this 1 model deep line of Uruks going across the table edge, hoping to stop them. So that's how it started, and pretty quick James started heading down one flank, so I started shuffling my line across, and my crossbows, I think, spent the first 2 turns walking forward while James came towards me to get into range, and then I started moving all my ferals and all my berserkers over to the one flank where I could hopefully catch him. It was pretty clear which flank he was coming down. So I think at those stages he'd also sent 6 knights off to the other flank to, I think, harass me, to do some shots and maybe try and just engage me on the other flank to distract me. And I have to say, my crossbows were absolute heroes against those guys. They just, over the course of a couple of turns, they shot, and I'll just tell you about these guys now, but over the course of the game, they got them down to 1 knight on foot. They killed 5 of them, and the last one's horse. And so those knights, I think the knights shot a couple of my crossbows, but 6 knights went down to my crossbow fire over there, which was just outstanding and really helped me out, so I wasn't being attacked on both fronts. So that was that, which was cool. And obviously I'm getting victory points for breaking him, so killing 5-6 knights in this army is a big deal. I think I had to kill 8 to break him. So meanwhile he's attacking down the side, and Saruman leans out and tries to Sorcerer's Blast a couple of my models on a 4+ because he's Saruman the White with 2 dice, and he didn't cast it, and this was going to be a theme of things to come, as it turned out. And I started forcing all my models. Can you imagine, he's now running Saruman on horse, 2 Rivendell Knight captains, and about 6 knights down the edge. And I'm realising, right, I've got to get over there. So I called a heroic march with Vrasku to move my whole army an extra 3 inches over, just to get them in the right area. And Saruman then commanded a model towards his knight captain, who charged, and I could obviously see this was a heroic combat in waiting. So I think that was James's priority. So I then moved just 2 guys almost directly behind that first guy, so that even when he did heroic combat, he could only go like a couple of inches. James still heroic combated with him to kill a few, so he killed the guy, charged into the next guy, I think killed him too. That was all right. He was working his way through, and then I was slowly able to just push over, and I was gradually getting there, and it was getting very, very close. And then his Rivendell Knight captain, who was the one he was trying to get off, his leader, managed to make a break. I think I dismounted the first captain, who'd been aggressive and done the combats, and his second captain managed to kind of get around and get down the flank to the point where he was about 7 inches away from the table edge, something like that. So pretty damn close, like kind of 1 move away. But to get there, he'd had to heroic move, which was his last might point. So I knew at this point that he now had no might with that guy, and Vrasku was coming over and did have might. And it was all getting very, very tense around there. I had a lot of guys kind of hanging around over there, but I was a kind of turn away from guaranteeing catching him, and I hadn't wounded him, and I don't think at that point, I don't think I'd broken him, but equally James was nowhere near breaking me. So it was kind of 0-0 at the moment, but as soon as he got the captain off, he'd be laughing. And he moved Saruman forward to within 6 inches of the captain, so he could clear. Saruman had 2 might left at this point, and it was done so that he could heroic move with Saruman, catch the captain, and then hopefully move them off. That was the plan. So Saruman's heroic move was key for him. And at this point, I had one guy, one feral, who was about 6 inches away from the captain, and what he could crucially do was not necessarily charge the captain, but just move in front of him, so that the next turn the captain would have to charge him. He wouldn't be able to move off. He would essentially just block his way, and there was one model that could get in range. And so Saruman, of course, it was the perfect ploy from James, compelled him so that he'd move him away, and the knight would be free to move. Now, bear in mind, this isn't game winning, but the knight would, if this came off, if he compelled him, then the next turn there'd be a heroic move roll off, and if James won it, he would probably move his captain off the table. Probably. It's hard to say. But so Saruman threw his 3 point at it and 1 from his store. He needs a 3 to cast command, and James rolled double 1. Yep, it was the Bosch to end all Bosches. And I remember him going, oh, and going over to his book to kind of go, all right, well, I'll might it because I need it, and realising that he cast it on a 3+, and he needed to get it off, he would have to use both points of might, which would then leave Saruman with no might to heroic move, and so he couldn't do it, which was just galling. And there's something, you know, sometimes when you do things in a game and you're trying to beat someone, you celebrate when they go well, and sometimes if something goes wrong for them, you might celebrate. But there are some rolls that are just like, that isn't fair, and when it came up, I just felt sick. Any other roll would have done it. If he'd got a 2 and a 1, he could have used 1 might point and kept 1 in the store. The Snake Eyes was the only roll that would not do it for him. So Saruman kept his might because he'd need it for the heroic move, and I was able to move my key feral over and block the Rivendell Knight. The next turn, I actually, maybe we didn't. I don't actually think we got to the heroic move roll off. Maybe we did. I think maybe we did. We did the heroic move the next turn, and I'm not sure who won it, but basically, because of the feral, the knight couldn't get off anyway. So whoever won it, I think I might have done, but it stopped the knight getting off crucially. And what this also meant was I was then able to pull everyone else over. So the feral had done his job for the 1 turn and pinned him in place, and I now moved my army over. So it went from the knight having a completely clear run, apart from 1 feral to the board edge, to having about 6 orcs in the way, and it looked very, very unlikely he'd ever get off. And on that turn, I was also able to get 3 2-attack models, two ferals and a berserker, I think, onto Saruman, which is pretty cool. And this wasn't particularly part of the game plan or anything, but I just everything had fallen right, so I charged him. And in the fight phase, I won the fight, which is fair enough. I think I had 6 attacks against his 1, and then he was trapped, so I had 12 attacks, and I think I did 4 wounds. I think maybe I only had 2 guys on him. I did a lot of 4 wounds from 12 doesn't seem like a lot. I suppose they need 5. Yeah, I think it was 4 wounds. And I was like, well, that's good, but it's not going to do a lot. Until James rolled a 1, a 1, and a 2 for his fate. So he could use his last 2 might points, or his last 1 might point, I think, to he might have rolled a 3 for a fate, to pass 1 fate, but he still took 3 wounds, and Saruman died in 1 round of combat, completely out of the blue, which took a might point off the board, which was absolutely huge. Yeah, this is right, because then I still had a might point on the board with Vrasku, and James had none, so he couldn't do anything. He couldn't. The next turn I was guaranteed to get the jump, and I can't honestly remember in the next turn if I got priority or if I heroic moved, but I jumped in and I was able to swamp the knight captain with about 6 guys, including Vrasku, won the fight and killed the leader on the edge of the board. So he was about yeah, 6 inches away from the board edge when I finally caught him. And yeah, it was galling. It was great, and I killed him. And I'd broken James, and he had I think he had by the end of it, I think he had 1 elf left, because the game doesn't technically end when the leader's dead. It ends at 25%. So there was another turn where I broke him for the VPs, and he was left with 1 elf or 2 elves or something. And so I managed to get a 6-0 win against an incredibly tough army played by a very, very good player. So it was a great game, I really enjoyed it. And for the second time at Slayer, me and, like fun little anecdote, me and James had the tennis on. Both tennis fans, and the Davis Cup was on today with Andy Murray playing. And so we had the iPad on streaming, and we'd done this for the French Open at the last Slayer event. And I remember thinking then, if I played, because I really like tennis, if I was playing anyone else, there's no way they'd let me put the tennis on. But I got drawn at James during Andy Murray's match. So we were like, tennis? Absolutely. So we had the iPad on, and we're, you know, streaming it, which is pretty good fun. Let me just come over here. Sorry. Get out of the way. So that was cool. And Andy Murray won this time. So we learned an interesting little anecdote, that Murray lost the last time we were watching it, and I lost the game, and Murray won this time, and I won the game against James. So if we're watching the tennis, when Murray wins, I win, and when Murray loses, James wins. So yeah, it was a great game. I loved it. It was very, very fun. We were having a great laugh for the entire thing. Very, very relaxed. Again, it was the sort of game that took a while, but because of the time limits, you know, it was all fine. And I felt awful for James. You know, neither of those huge rolls guaranteed the loss or the win for me, but the snake eyes from Saruman was huge, and killing Saruman in combat in one go was massive. And my crossbows as well, my crossbows did a hell of a lot of damage. 5 crossbows did a volley at 3 Rivendell Knights. All 5 of them hit. This is separate to the ones I've told you about. They were shooting the ones on the flank. All 5 of them hit, and I think they killed 1 knight and killed a horse on the other knight, which was just hilarious. Well, not hilarious for James, but I just couldn't believe how well they did for me. They had a huge impact in reducing the amount of horses I was facing to the amount of charges, but James just got incredibly unlucky. We chatted about the game for a long time afterwards. He did everything right. I don't think if he played it again he'd do it any differently, but just the snake eyes from Saruman was awful. But again, I was pleased with how I played it. I think I thought about it a lot in advance, and I think I did the right thing deploying at the back, and I managed to, I think the heroic march I told you about with Rascal was incredibly important, because if you bear in mind that feral was just in range, if I hadn't heroic marched, he might well have not been in range, and he might have got the captain off. So I was pleased with the way I played it, and kind of very happy with how it went. But I did feel sorry for James. There was a few things in that where it's just like, that is awful. That is absolutely awful. So yeah, so quite unexpectedly, I have to say, I won my 5th game, putting me on 4 wins and a loss. And so suddenly, I'm going into the last game thinking I could win. And it was slightly out of my hands, because Dave Nolan, who had beaten me on day 1, was on 5 wins. Yeah, is that right? 5 wins? No, 4. I think Dave, I don't know. Maybe Dave was on 5 wins and 4 wins and a draw. Let's say that. Yeah, I think Dave was on 4 wins and a draw. And so if Dave lost his last game, and he was playing Ed with his Rivendell Knights at Reconnoiter, and I won my last game, I would win. I think that's how it stood. And those are 2 big ifs. You know, 2 results have got to go your way. But Ed had his Rivendell Knight army against Dave. David added another 12 Berserkers. So he had elves to beat a Fell Beast, and he had lots of shooting to take down the Berserkers. So there was definitely a good chance for Ed to beat Dave. So I was thinking that could happen. And then I got drawn against David Reed in the last game. And as I said before, I don't like recon as a scenario for my army. It doesn't particularly suit my army very well at all. and David is a very, very good player, and he had a very good army. But I was still thinking I could win this. I could win this game. It's gonna be interesting, but I've definitely got a chance. And if I win and Ed wins, somehow I'll win this tournament. So going into the last game, it was cool. And what it also meant was the 3 top tables were all talking to each other, because I wanted Ed to win so that I had a chance, and they were on the top table. David obviously wanted to win, but David also wanted Steve Crow to lose, I think, to Daniel Entwistle on the table 3, so that, because if he lost, then I think David jumped above Steve or something like that. So the 3 tables were literally talking to each other, going, "Are you doing your job? Are you doing your job?" Which is really great to see. Like when you're in the last game of the tournament and the 6 players kind of potentially playing for the win are kind of having a laugh with each other. It's really very positive, and it was a very relaxed tournament. That man was going over the speed limit. It was a very relaxed tournament in that respect, and that was really great to see. So yeah, so I got drawn against David Reed in the last game, which I was also very happy with, because David's great. I think we worked out we'd played 3 times before, maybe 4, and we always have great games and incredibly tight games. And so I knew it was going to be interesting, and Recon's an interesting scenario. So, and Recon's another one of the scenarios that at tournaments it normally gets cut short because of the time limit. You just don't get a chance to finish it. But I was fairly certain that this one we would at least finish it. So, deployment. Dave brought on he had 6 Serpent Riders led by a Chieftain, I believe, and he brought them on one flank. And I knew they were important for Recon because of their speed, and I didn't want him just running those off. So I brought on my leader and all his berserkers to challenge them, to essentially counter them. And I then deployed all my crossbows in the middle with my other berserkers. Meanwhile, he deployed all his other warriors kind of off to the opposite flank to his Serpent Riders and moved his Fellbeast into the middle. So we started marching up. We spent a couple of turns kind of positioning ourselves, and David's plan became pretty clear. It was he was going to charge the Fellbeast in and charge the Serpent Riders in and try and just mess me up and break me, which is very, very doable, and then march the other guys off the table, essentially. That seemed to be the plan. So again, I was worried, but I had fight 4, he had fight 4, so I could take that against the Serpent Riders. If I got the charge, that'd be alright. And I can beat Fellbeast. I can take down Fellbeast with this army. So I was thinking it's going to be, this big ruckus in the middle is going to be huge. Because if I can kill more, I had more models than him to begin with. So if I can kill all of his models for relatively little loss, I can then run off the table. That was the kind of thinking. So I actually had to, I think in turn 3, I had to do a heroic move which I won, to get my guys back, like out of charge range of the cavalry. And it was then, which, you know, it might seem ridiculous, you know, running back towards your table edge, but I couldn't risk being hit where I was. The crossbowmen were up and they didn't have any support, so I kind of went back. And so the next turn then, David charges in with everything. He hits my front line, which is mainly crossbows, with all the Serpent Riders, and he flies the Knight of Umbar on the Fellbeast, who was his leader, behind my line and into the guys. And because he was charging and he's the Knight of Umbar, I was like, well, this isn't going to end well this turn. There's no way, because he's going to he's got, what do you have? He had 3 attacks charging and he had 3 might. So I was like, unless he spectacularly boshes, the Knight's winning that fight. And he actually, because I was able to kind of swamp his cavalry a bit, he called a heroic combat with the Knight, not to kill everyone and move again, but so that he would fight that first, inevitably win, and then hurl down the line. And so we fought that first, and again, all I was hoping for was maybe a 5 to draw another point of might, and David rolled a 4 highest, and thankfully the guys that got on the Fellbeast got a 6, so he had to use his last 2 points of might to win, which was crucial because it then meant his chieftain had used his might by this point. So in this big bit in the middle, he had no might, which was huge, and I still had Vrasku on 1 mite, so I could get the heroic move next turn and probably kill the Felbeast. This was pretty big news for me. But anyway, his hurl came off, and he charged. He hurled down this line that hit about 8 guys, killed the crossbowman he hurled. I think we worked out he hit 9 of my guys, all defense 5, all ferros and crossbows, and despite doing strength 3 hits on them, I think he only killed 2. So I was thinking that could have been a lot worse. So that was okay, but it did mean then in the fights against the cavalry he'd knocked most of my guys down. But thankfully I've been able to swamp in and go in the back. So we went round, and I was able to kill a good few of the Serpent Riders, and I think he killed a few more crossbows. And the big fight came with Vrasku, who was now on the floor, who rolled a 3 highest, I believe, and the Serpent Rider charging him rolled a 4. Vrasku was on the floor, the Serpent Rider had charged, the Serpent Rider would get 4 attacks against him, needing 4s to wound because of his War Spear. And if he did 2, he could kill Vrasku, and if he did 3 4s out of 4 dice, he'd guarantee killing Vrasku. And I agonised for ages, because I could use the point of might to win the fight and stand up, but then I wouldn't have the point of might for priority the next turn. And it was just horrible. And eventually I decided I just couldn't take the risk, because I thought he's bound to do 2 out of 4 wounds on his 4 dice, and then I've just got to fail the fate of Vrasku's dead. So I used the point of might, stood up, but then was utterly, so we're now in this centre area with no might. And so the next turn rolls around, and priority comes around, and I win priority. And that was an absolutely huge roll. And so what that allowed me to do is get to charge all of the cavalry, all of the Serpent Riders, and I managed to get 9 attacks onto the Felbeast. Remember, the Knight of Umbar has got no might at this stage, and so I had, I think it was 3 Berserkers, Vrasku, and a Shaman who were on him, so 9 attacks. And I was like, all right, okay, we can do this. Just don't, obviously, with fight 5, the fight's tied. I was like, David, just don't get a 6, please don't get a 6. So before we got to combat, he was moving his models down the side, and one warband of about 12 was still heading for the table edge, whilst the other warband led by the Taskmaster started heading towards my army. And I should tell you now what my plan was at this stage. Assuming I killed the Felbeast, I would then have killed enough of his models that I had more models in my army than he had in his, and then I would just walk away from him, let him move all his models off the board edge, and I'd move all mine off, and the game wouldn't end because neither of us would get to 25%, neither of us would be broken. And at that point I was thinking, I'll probably win that by a victory point or 2. And then I'll have 3 for killing his leader if I kill the Felbeast. So I was like, and that'll win it for me. I was like, that's a good plan, it can work. And so we got to the fight phase, and obviously because he could potentially hurl if he did win, what did I do? I did the Felbeast last, and in all the fights against the cavalry, against the Serpent Riders, they went incredibly well, and I killed, I think all but 2 maybe I managed to wipe out. And so we came to it, the big fight, and I was like, even if he gets a 6, it'll be a roll-off, and I'll have a 50-50 chance. I was like, please David, don't get a 6. And he chucked his dice, and to my delight, he got a 4 highest with the Knight of Umbar. And I was like, yes, alright, we have it. A 5 or a 6 will win it for me, a 4 would be a tie, and I've got 9 dice. And I threw my 9 dice, and honest to God, it felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, because I looked down, and in my 9 dice, the highest roll I had was a 3. A 3. 9 dice. There were 6 ones in there, and David kind of exploded with glee. I've never rolled worse than that. I've never done a roll worse than that. It was absolutely horrific. It just happens. There were 6 ones in there, and I was just devastated, because I remember thinking that horrendously unlikely situation is going to cost me this game. So as it was, David was then able to hurl again, and he hurled one of my crossbowmen through a couple of, like 4 more crossbowmen, and I think he killed 3 with that hurl, and then he went into his chieftain. He had given up on his chieftain by this point, I think quite rightly so, but he dismounted his chieftain as well, but you know, because the chieftain was bound to die, which was a good move. I think he did well with that. Oh, got some flashing lights behind, just moved out of the way. So that was a good move on David's part, and allowed him to get, there we go, ambulance going past, and allowed him to get a few more. But I was just devastated, and I was genuinely, I know it's a game, and I know it's just like just dice and it happens, but that was one of those proper punch in the stomach, that's not fair moments. That's not fair. 9 dice and I need a 5. Surely. But you know, it happens. So the game went on, and because of that, I think David then was trying to hold me up. He then realised he could get a load of models off and he could stop me. So he was sending the Taskmaster and about 10 of his guys, so another warband, towards me, and the other 10 were still walking off the board. So the next turn came around, and I think David won priority, but because my leader had been over in this corner, trying to, if you remember, I said he was doing the, he was put on the board to counter the Serpent Riders, and I'd put him on there, and he had walked around this piece of scenery. It was now in range of the Fellbeast, and so I was able to call the right move and get the jump on the Fellbeast again. But because how did it work? Because I couldn't charge in. My leader had 1 might point left, so he could call a heroic strike and guarantee the win. But if I failed my courage test to charge the Fellbeast, it would cancel my heroic move. So I didn't charge my leader in. But I got loads and loads of guys in. I got about 10 guys onto the Knight of Umbar this time, charging into him, thinking, all right, this time just don't do it again. And in this turn, I then killed his chieftain on the floor and his last Serpent Rider, so that was the last of the cavalry gone. And in the fight phase, Dave rolled for his Fellbeast, and I think he got a 3 highest this time. And thankfully, this time I didn't choke, and I won the fight. And he was trapped, and I just had so many dice on him that I killed the Knight of Umbar. And we actually remarked afterwards, it was amazing that the Knight of Umbar had actually only used 2 will. He won 1 fight, so you know he won 2 fights, so he didn't lose any will for that, and then he used 2 will to cast 1 spell, and but he was taken off after that. So I killed the Fellbeast, and this was huge. And I just killed the Serpent Riders, and this was absolutely massive for me. And I was now kind of unimposed, going towards the just rushing straight forward towards the table edge. Apart from the Taskmaster, who had now brought 1 more band over, and in the next turn David called a heroic move with the Taskmaster. I countered with my leader and used his last point of might, and David won the roll-off. And what he was then able to do was just hurl, there weren't many models at all, but he was able to hurl 1 onto, just block my way all the way across this little fighting area so that I couldn't push past. And I was like, alright, this is frustrating, but the plan will still work, until I realised that he was clearly now throwing these guys in to try and break me and to fight. And in doing so, as I mentioned earlier, my army can't not kill things, it can't shield, and I was going to break him. And I didn't want to break him in this game, because I needed, as soon as I break him, his models might run away, and I needed the time to walk across the board, and I didn't want to break him at all, because if I broke him, he'd get to 25%, and the game would end before I moved my guys off the table. And so I was then starting to think, oh, this isn't good. And meanwhile, David was moving 9 guys towards the table edge. Now, that doesn't matter in the slightest if I don't break David, because I've got loads more guys to move off the table. But if I do break him, and he gets 9 off, then the game's going to end before I can move any guys off, and he'll win like 9-6. I've got 3 for breaking him, 3 for killing his leader. So it suddenly became like kind of frustratingly in it again. I was like, I thought I had it. When the Fellbeast went down, I could have had it. but this suddenly changed everything again. And so we started scrapping, and then I killed some of the guys, and then I think I broke him in that turn, I think. And the next turn, the Taskmaster used his last might point to call another heroic move, which I couldn't counter, because I now had no might left, and he did it again and blocked me again. He was broken this turn, and he had 9 guys within range of the edge of the board, and they're all courage 3. Now bear in mind, I'm 6-0 up at this point, so I was like, okay, so if he moves 5 off, I'll win, because it's 6-5. And he hasn't really got any more guys within range of the edge, so it's just on these 9. If he moves 6 off, it's a tie, and 7 or more off, he wins. But he's got to pass courage tests with all of them, and they're all courage 3. I was like, he should fail enough. And he went along the line, and he passed 7 out of 9 courage tests, which is the exact worst possible amount for me and the perfect amount for David. So he moves 7 guys off the table, making the score 7-6 to him. They obviously count as still being alive in terms of him reaching 25%. But his when he gets down to 8 models, that's when he's at 25%. So as soon as it doesn't keep him safe, I think it's when he's down to, I think it was when he's down to 8. When he's down to 9, no, that was it. When he's down to 9, he's at 25%. And my hope was that David would actually move 9 off to get the victory points and thus keep the game going indefinitely. But to be fair, he'd said later on, like he was wise to that, and he was only ever going to move 8 off, which is fair enough. I'm glad about that, because if he hadn't done it because of a kind of mistake, I think it would have been harder than if he knew about it. So it's the classic tricky thing of recon again. So I'm now at the point going, oh my god, so now he's broken and I've somehow got to keep these models alive and not run. So I was then fighting him and trying to break through a few ferals who were making it, but bear in mind, we're fighting this scrap maybe on the centre lines, they've got a long way to go. And a few broke through, and then of course I'm doing my best with my models to not kill by, you know, going two-handed with the berserkers, feinting with the crossbows when they're fighting fight 4 stuff, so they lose fights. And it didn't work, and if anything it backfired on me, because then when I won I was more likely to kill. So I remember the berserkers in particular going against the Taskmaster, and I was like, he's got really high courage, he'll stay alive, he'll pass this stand fast. So I went two-handed against him and then won the fight anyway, and then killed the Taskmaster. And I was like, oh god, that didn't work. So that went on for a turn. Then the next turn I was like, just win priority. If I can win priority, I'll put a crossbowman on every one of his last models, so they don't run away, and keeps the game going while I break for the edge. And I think that turn he won priority again, and he moved, he charged into like ferals and stuff, and I did my best, but kind of cut him up, moved a whole like 10 guys or something towards the table edge, but you know, it was far too late. And then the last turn he won priority again, and he a load more, and enough of the guys ran to get him to 25%. That was it. There were 7 had moved off the board, and he had 2 guys left on the board. So or no, 1 guy left on the board. There was like a Watcher of Kana on the board, and so the game would end this turn. And so I killed the Watcher of Kana, and the game ended, and I wasn't broke. I think I had 23 models left on the board, and he had 7 left alive that had moved off the table. But of course the game had ended, and it won 7-6. It ended 7-6 to David, and like, fair play to him. He played it really, really well. But I was gutted. There's no way about it. I was thinking, you know, I felt like I did well in it, and I played well, and because he's a top bloke and he's a good friend, and I was like, you try not to let that kind of show, you know, you try not to take the victory away from your opponent, but it's so hard when you're that kind of deflated. But hopefully, I don't think he took it away. I think he understood. But I think all told, I have to admit, as horrendous as my Felbeach roll was, I think history will show that evened out. Like the turn before, when he only rolled a 4 for the Knight of Umbar when charging and had to use both might, and then the turn afterwards when he only rolled a 3 highest for the night, so I could kill him. And also with his hurl, when he hurled through 9 guys and he only killed 2. My 9 dice seems like the big bosh, but I think things evened out there, and that's kind of fair enough, I think. But the one that got me was 9 guys on the edge of the board. If he failed with courage free, if he fails 4 courage tests, I win the game by 6-5, and he passed 7 of them. And that was the thing. I was like, and you know, it's a dice game, isn't it? You know, he passed enough courage tests and they stayed alive. But I was just gutted. I was like, come on. And what also, we were chatting about it afterwards, and what we also realised was, by me boshing and not killing the fell beast, it wasn't about killing him that was the issue. The huge issue was that I was then pinned in place for another turn, which then allowed his taskmaster to get off, attack me, and get himself broken, and again win the game. So if I'd have not rolled that horrendous roll, I would have been moving, like, you know, the next turn I would have been moving away from his army. I would have been moving towards the board edge. He wouldn't have been broken, and he never would have caught me. And it's that kind of, oh my god. So, you know, the courage tests and the 9 dice, they were like, those things cost me the game, unfortunately. But it is what it is, and it was a great game, and it could have gone in so many ways. It could have gone differently. Perhaps what I should have done was, I think on reflection, there's no way I could have known about the total point score, but there was all these berserkers I told you about that came round the side. A lot of them never fought combat until they got swamped by the Taskmaster's warband. So I think what I should have done is actually just send a couple off. If I'd have sent a couple towards the table edge and got them off, you know, if I'd have got 2 off, I would have won. But and they probably had time to do it. But alas, I didn't. So yes, that was that. And so we wandered and we got a cup of tea and we had a sit down and a good talk about it. It was a great game, brilliant, really enjoyed it. They were all good games, and David's very, very nearly could have been my best game or most sporting. I think he said he gave me his, but it had to go to Callum for me, like, just because of how fun it was. So it's always nice when you're picking your most sporting, and the reason it's hard is because you've got too many great games to pick between. So thanks to David. He was, as ever, an incredibly tough opponent to play against, but he's such a good guy, such a sincere top bloke, and lots of fun. So we went and sat, and I was thinking, but yeah, there's no denying, I was thinking, if Dave loses his game, I'm going to have not won the tournament because of those courage tests. And I was like, oh, and because not rolling a 5 on 9 dice, I was like, please, please, please. So then, of course, my whole outlook changed, and I wanted Ed to lose. I wanted Dave to win so that he won the tournament, because that meant even if I had won, it wouldn't have mattered. And I'm relieved to say, I suppose, that Dave did win his game. So Dave managed to win, and in doing so, get a perfect. Did he win all his games? I think he got a perfect 6 out of 6. Did he? Maybe. Or maybe 5 and a draw. I think it might have been 5 and a draw. I don't know. But anyway, he'd beaten Ed in the final round at Recon, and in doing so, won the tournament. So congrats to Mr. Dave Nolan. He won. And again, as I said, made it a big relief for me, because suddenly I was like, all right, well, I wouldn't have won anyway. I think if I'd have beaten David, I would have come second in the tournament, I think, because I would have had 5 wins and a loss, I think. So yeah, I would have come second, but I wouldn't have won it. So Dave won, and in doing so, Dave also finally broke the trend and became the first person to win 2 100-point GBHL tournaments this year. So my battery died. Yep. It turns out I went on longer than I thought I would. It is now the day after I got back safe. But yeah, I chatted about the tournament review, and I just looked, and it's quite a long one. It's nearly 2 hours, so sorry about that if I bored you. But also, I'd like to say a big thank you, because it did keep me sane, and the journey kind of flew past, and it really, really worked. So maybe that's something to consider for future long journeys home, particularly from my own. So yeah, as I said, Dave won his last game. He won the tournament. He's the first person to win 2 100-point tournament, so well done there. And I myself finished 4th, which I was really very pleased with. I think I would have taken 4th if you'd offered it to me at the start of the weekend, but of course, if I had beaten David in the last game, I would have finished 2nd. So I wouldn't have won, but it would have given me an extra 10 league points. David got 95 and I got 85. So I do think it's hampered my chances a bit in the league, potentially. I think I did make an improvement. I made an improvement of about 4 points, but I've actually gone down a place because Dave jumped above me. So I think I'm currently in 5th. So still in with a chance, but big handicap for me is with 3 tournaments left, I'm only going to 2 of them. So it's very much out of my hands now. I'll have to put in a good showing at Desolation Stockport at the very least. So yes, that was my tournament review. All told, I loved it. After that game, we all said goodbye. We headed off to KFC as always. I managed to go to the right one this time. And then I headed home, and that's where you saw me in the car. It was awesome. It was a really great weekend. I loved it. Great to see everyone. Stay up on an awesome event as always. I drank loads of tea as always, and I didn't pay my tab. I need to ring them about that. I need to ring them and pay my tab. It's about 20 cups of tea that I need to pay for. But it was really good. I know some people thought the games were too long, but I've got to be honest, I thought it was lovely. Like playing a game in a very relaxed manner and then having a lot of time to chat to your opponent. I had a lot of downtime over the tournament weekend that I really enjoyed catching up with a wide range of people. There's a lot of tournaments you go to and you just barely get to speak to anyone. So that was cool. But yes, so yeah, it was great and I loved it, and that was my experience of it. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and sorry I couldn't quite finish it off in the car, but I hope it gave you something to do while you're painting. Until next time, don't forget to comment, like, share and subscribe, support your hobby, support Jamie on Patreon, like us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. Support your hobby again, and happy strategy battle gaming.